started with a lie about coffee. That's the first thing I remember clearly. I told my husband I stopped for coffee on the way to work, but I didn't. I was just late. I had slept in, left the house in a rush, skipped breakfast, and sat in traffic for half an hour with the window down, listening to nothing. When I got to the office, I looked him in the eye over text and said, "Lying at the coffee shop was insane." He replied, "No worries. Hope it was worth it." And that was it. A nothing moment, a white lie. But the second I sent that message, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. A flicker of control. Not power, just attention. I had created a new version of my morning, and he believed it. That stirred something in me. Something small, but alive. My husband's name is Ben. We've been together since we were 20. College sweethearts, safe, predictable. The kind of couple that remembers garbage day and shares Spotify playlists. We have a 2-bedroom apartment, no kids, 2 cats, and a calendar with color-coded schedules on the fridge. I love him. I want to say that clearly. He's good, gentle. He never yells, never forgets to lock the door at night, always texts me when he's on the way home. But somewhere along the way, our life became one long routine. No fights, no fireworks. Just quiet dinners, shared laundry, and falling asleep with the TV still on. And eventually, I stopped feeling anything at all. I started telling little lies just to make the day interesting. Not to hurt him. Just to see if I could. That sounds worse than it is. But maybe it's exactly as bad as it sounds. I told him my boss called when he didn't. I said I had a headache to avoid going out. I told him someone complimented my outfit when no one had. Each time I felt a rush, like I had taken a detour in an otherwise flat road. I didn't think it would go beyond that. I didn't want it to. Then came the office happy hour. It wasn't anything dramatic. Just drinks at a bar down the block. Everyone loosening their ties and switching from email voices to real ones. I sat next to a guy named Drew. We'd worked together for almost a year, but never talked beyond meetings. That night, we laughed. Not forced laughter. Real. He asked about my favorite movies. I made fun of his choice of drink. He touched my arm when I said something sarcastic. I felt seen. When I got home, Ben was on the couch with one of the cats in his lap. He looked up and said, "Fun night?" I said, "Yeah," and went to shower. I didn't tell him about Drew. Not because anything happened, but because I knew how it would sound, even though it was nothing. Except it wasn't nothing to me. It was the first time in a long time that I had felt awake. Drew messaged me a few days later. Something harmless. A joke about someone in the office. I laughed too hard. I replied too fast. And when he sent another message the next day, I didn't hesitate. It didn't turn into anything immediately, but we started talking. A lot. Private messages during work hours, late-night replies to Instagram stories, compliments that were just far enough from inappropriate to deny, but close enough to feel electric. I told Ben I was tired from work. That's why I was on my phone. That's why I wasn't in the mood. That's why I went to bed early or stayed up late. He believed me, because I had never given him a reason not to. And the more I lied, the more I wanted to lie. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't about covering things up. It was about building a separate version of myself. One that was exciting, sharp, desired. With Ben, I had stability. With Drew, I had unpredictability. With myself, I had a secret I could carry like a second skin. The first time I thought about cheating, really thought about it, I was brushing my teeth. I looked in the mirror and thought, he has no idea. And the thought made me feel powerful, not proud, but alive. That was the beginning. I hadn't done anything. Not yet. But the line between imagination and intent was already gone. The first time it happened, it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like gravity. It was after another late evening at the office. Most people had left. The hallway lights were dimmed, and I was pretending to finish a report I didn't need to write. Drew walked past my desk, stopped, and said, "You really never go home on time, do you?" I smiled. What can I say? I'm committed. He leaned against the edge of my desk, said nothing for a moment, just looked at me, and then, "You want to grab a drink?" I should have said no. I didn't. We walked to the same bar from before, sat in the corner, close but not touching. We talked for hours again, and the words didn't matter. What mattered was the way he looked at me like I was fascinating, like I was still someone who surprised people. When he walked me to my car, I could feel it coming. That pause, that hesitation, that moment where the air changes and everything is possible if no one speaks first. This time, I spoke. "Do you want to come sit for a minute?" He said, "Sure." We sat in my car, music low, windows fogging slightly in the night air. He said something about the sky. I said something about how quiet the city felt. And then he kissed me, and I kissed him back. It wasn't slow or soft. It wasn't cinematic. It was hungry, sudden, clumsy, and I let it happen. Not because I wanted romance, not because I wanted him, but because I wanted to know I still had the power to make something happen. Anything. On my terms. When he pulled away, I said I should go. He nodded, said nothing else, got out of the car. I sat there for another 10 minutes before I started the engine. When I got home, Ben was already asleep. I crawled into bed. My heart was calm, not racing, not panicked, just still. The next morning, I told Ben I'd be late that night. He smiled. "Take your time." That made me want to scream, not because I was angry, but because his kindness made me feel smaller than my guilt ever could. I told myself it wouldn't happen again, that it was a one-time thing, that it didn't mean anything. But when Drew messaged me the next day, I didn't block him. I replied, "Hey." Just that. 2 letters, and it was already happening again. We didn't see each other for a week, but we talked, constantly. And I realized that lying had become a language I now spoke fluently. Every time I said I was tired or had a late call or was staying behind to finish work, it was easier, smoother. It came without hesitation. And each lie made the next one more natural. Not only to Ben, but to myself. I told myself this was a phase, that I was figuring something out, that I just needed to feel again, and then I'd come back to my real life. But that wasn't true. Because every time I told a lie, I didn't feel shame. I felt relief. And I wanted more. It didn't take long for it to become routine. I created a rhythm. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I stayed late. Wednesdays, I went to a yoga class that didn't exist. Saturdays, I said I was meeting a friend who'd moved out of town 2 years ago. And every single time, Ben said, "Okay, have fun." I started cheating like people take smoke breaks. Brief, predictable, unsatisfying, but somehow necessary. I wasn't chasing intimacy. I wasn't even chasing pleasure. I was chasing the space it gave me for myself. With Drew, it was easy. We didn't talk about my life, and I didn't ask about his. We had a silent agreement. This didn't follow us home. It existed in corners, parking lots, hotel rooms, empty apartments while someone was away. When I came home, I'd kiss Ben on the cheek, ask about his day, and fall into our shared routines like nothing had happened. I made dinner, paid bills, laughed at the right moments. I played the role so well, I started to believe it again. That's the thing about lying. Once you're in it deep enough, you stop thinking of it as deception. It just becomes the way things are. The version of yourself that lives with your partner is no longer you. It's a character. And that character doesn't cheat. That character folds laundry and remembers birthdays and makes French toast on Sundays. And so the real you keeps slipping further away, unrecognizable even to yourself. The strange thing was, I didn't hate Ben. Not even a little. He was thoughtful. He was gentle. He remembered to warm the car on cold mornings so I wouldn't have to. He wrote me notes and left them in the fridge. Sometimes I'd find a post-it that said, "I missed your laugh today," and I'd stare at it like it was written to someone else, because I knew he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the version of me I no longer brought home. And instead of making me stop, it made me go deeper, because I couldn't stand the idea of showing him who I'd become. So I polished the mask even harder. I'd wake up some mornings and forget what excuse I'd used the day before. I started keeping a note on my phone just to track what I'd told him, who I was with, where I was, what time I said I'd left. It wasn't about getting away with anything. It was about control, about creating a world where I decided what was true and what wasn't. Ben would ask how my day was. I'd invent stories, a new intern at work, a difficult client, a funny moment at lunch that never happened. And he'd laugh, nod, say, "You tell stories so well." And I did. Because they were all stories. One night we had dinner with another couple, friends from college. On the way home, Ben said, "I'm really lucky you still like me. So many couples lose the spark." And I smiled, and something in me cracked. Not because I was caught, but because he truly believed it. Because I had become so good at pretending to be happy, I had convinced the one person who knew me best that everything was still okay. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just lying to protect myself anymore. I was lying because the lie had become more bearable than the truth. There was a moment I almost let him catch me. I left my phone unlocked on the nightstand, messages open, notifications unmuted. I was in the shower. I left the door open. It would have taken 2 seconds for him to glance, to see the name, to read what I couldn't say out loud. But when I came out, he was still in bed, headphones on, watching something on his laptop. He smiled at me, reached for my hand, told me I smelled like coconut. And I hated how much I loved him in that moment. Because I knew that love was the only thing keeping me from telling him everything. And also the only thing making me want to be found. There's a kind of desperation that comes with lying too long. It starts to rot from the inside. You get good at hiding, but you also get tired. Tired of remembering what version of the truth you told. Tired of rerouting your own mind. Tired of holding two separate lives in your hands and pretending one isn't slowly burning through the other. I started making mistakes. Small ones at first. I left a receipt from a restaurant we never went to. Said I was going to a movie and forgot which one I claimed. Told him I was with Claire, not realizing I'd already used her name 2 nights ago. Ben didn't question any of it. Not once. And that made it worse. Because I started wondering if he really trusted me, or if deep down he already knew and just couldn't face it. The next time I was with Drew, I wasn't careful. I didn't bother to close my messages, didn't rush home. I even wore the same sweater Ben had hugged me in that morning. And still, nothing. No questions, no shift. Just the same warm smile, the same, "Hey babe, how was it?" I said it was fine, nothing special. And he said, "I missed you." And that was the first time I wanted to cry. Because I missed myself too. I missed the version of me that didn't have to lie to feel alive. The version who could wake up and look at herself without wondering how long this could continue before something or someone broke. Drew started asking questions I didn't want to answer. He wanted to know what I was doing, where it was going, whether I ever thought about leaving Ben. I said no, but I didn't stop seeing him. Because I wasn't cheating for a future. I wasn't building something new. I was just trying to outrun the weight of my own stillness. There were moments when I'd be lying beside Ben at night, and I'd imagine telling him. Every word, every detail. I'd picture him crying or yelling or going cold. But in every version of that fantasy, the part I couldn't get past was what would happen after. Would he leave? Would he forgive me? Would I even deserve it if he did? And then I'd roll over, kiss his shoulder, and go back to sleep. Lying, even in my dreams. It was a text. That's all it took. I was in the kitchen, pouring tea. My phone buzzed on the counter. Ben was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. I didn't think twice about leaving the phone there. I had gotten lazy, or maybe just reckless. Maybe a part of me wanted it to happen. The screen lit up. A name, a sentence. Drew. Still thinking about last night. I can't stop. I didn't see Ben read it. I only noticed the silence. When I came back in, the room felt different. He wasn't reading anymore. He was holding my phone. Not gripping it, just holding it gently, like it might break if he squeezed too hard. He didn't say anything at first, just looked up at me and said, "Who's Drew?" I froze. Every lie I'd ever told lined up like soldiers in my mind. Ready, available. All I had to do was choose one. But I didn't. I sat down on the chair across from him and said, "Someone from work?" He nodded. "Someone you kissed?" I paused. "More than that." He nodded again, slowly, as if he already knew the answer and had just been waiting for confirmation. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He didn't ask for more. He just said, "How long?" I gave him a number. I don't even remember if it was accurate. He looked at the floor, took a deep breath, exhaled through his nose. And then he said, "Are you in love with him?" I shook my head. "Are you trying to leave me?" "No." "Then why?" And there it was again, the question I'd never had a good answer for. I said, "I don't know." He didn't flinch. "That's what hurts the most," he said, "that it wasn't about love or hate or anything I can understand." I wanted to reach for him, to say something comforting, but there was nothing left to soften. He stood up, walked into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water. When he came back, he said, "I'm not going to ask you to explain it. I don't want the details. I don't want to hear his name again." I nodded. "I just want to know if you're done." And I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I wasn't sure I could stop lying even now. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Okay." And he went to bed. No door slamming, no suitcase, no last words. Just silence. I stayed in the living room for over an hour. Phone in my hand, tea gone cold, staring at nothing. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel desired. I didn't feel anything but hollow. Because being caught didn't ruin me. Realizing that he had been waiting for me to come back, for me to stop, and I never did. That's what broke me. He didn't leave right away. We still shared a space, slept in the same bed, though never at the same time. He started working longer hours. I started waking up earlier, just to avoid the quiet tension of breakfast together. We didn't talk about it again. He never asked if I ended it. I never told him. There were days I stared at my phone, reading old messages I'd already deleted from Drew. Not because I missed him, but because I didn't know what else to fill the silence with. I stopped lying, at least out loud. But the lies were still there, stitched into the routine. When people asked how we were, I said, "We're working through things." When my mom asked if I was okay, I said, "Just tired from work." When I looked in the mirror, I smiled just long enough to believe it for 5 seconds, and that was enough. Ben started making dinner again, not for both of us, just for himself. But he'd still set a second plate. Sometimes I ate, sometimes I left it there, untouched. I asked him once if he hated me. He said, "No, I'm just tired of trying to be the only one who sees us." I wanted to cry, but the tears never came. I had already used them up in versions of this story that only existed in my head. The one where I confessed and begged, the one where he yelled and I collapsed, the one where it all exploded and we started over. But this was quieter, more honest, and far more painful. Eventually, Drew stopped messaging me. I didn't reach out. We hadn't had anything real, just the thrill of pretending. He was never the danger. I was. Ben and I kept living together for another month. By the time he finally packed a small bag and said, "I think I need space," it didn't feel like a break. It felt like he was just doing what I couldn't. I didn't ask him where he was going. I didn't ask if he'd come back. He didn't leave a note, just folded his hoodie over the back of the chair, took his keys, and closed the door without locking it. I stared at that door for a long time. Not because I wanted to chase him, but because it was the first time in months I had no one left to lie to. I thought I'd feel free. Instead, I felt weightless, like I was drifting out of my own life. Weeks passed. I deleted every message. I shut off notifications. I told friends we were taking a break. I said it like I believed it, like we were two people working through something we hadn't both already surrendered to. But deep down, I knew. We weren't working on anything. We were just waiting for the silence to grow too loud to ignore. Now, when I think back on it all, the lying, the pretending, the cheating, I don't feel guilt in the way people expect. I feel exhaustion. Because I didn't ruin a relationship chasing something better. I ruined it because I didn't know how to live inside something quiet without burning it down just to hear the noise. I still don't know if I would have stopped if I hadn't been caught. And that's the part I can't forgive in myself.